Judge rejects challenge to mail-in ballots in North Dakota. A federal judge has dismissed a lawsuit challenging North Dakota's mail-in ballot law that allows ballots to be counted 4 days after Election Day. Not good. Not good at all. Hopefully this can go appeal higher or something, but a federal judge has dismissed a lawsuit brought by a legal foundation focused on election integrity cases that sought to invalidate a North Dakota law that allows mail-in ballots to be counted for 13 days after Election Day. U.S. District Court Judge Daniel Traynor said in his February 2nd order that the lawsuit both lacked standing and failed to show harm or violation of constitutional rights. The complaint is dismissed, Judge Traynor, an appointee of former President Donald Trump, wrote in the order. So this might be a case where the legal technicalities mean that it should not have been brought forward in this way. But it should be brought forward. This issue needs to be resolved. Because the longer you let them count, even if it's just 1 day longer, you multiply the potential for election. The lawsuit was filed in July 2023 by the Public Interest Legal Foundation, PILF, great name, on behalf of Burleigh County Auditor Mark Splonkowski. Another great name. Mr. Splonkowski, as county auditor, is required to enforce state law in the administration of elections in Burleigh County. He argued that conflicts between state and federal law force him into an impossible situation in which he risks criminal penalties. Quote, North Dakota law and defendants' enforcement of it harm Mr. Splonkowski because they put him in the position of having to choose between dictates of state law to accept and allow votes to be cast after Election Day and federal law that requires a single election day. Okay, that actually sounds like standing to me. That sounds like it does affect him directly. Lack standing fails to show harm or violation of constitutional rights. Unless they're just wrong that those two laws are in conflict, this does seem like something that needs to be taken up. It does seem like a conflict. A key argument in his lawsuit was that the U.S. Constitution provides that federal elections occur on 1 day, while North Dakota law allows for mail-in ballots to be counted for up to 13 days after Election Day, so long as they're postmarked on or before the election. Impossibility in enforcing the law. Mr. Splonkowski, who in his role as auditor must swear to uphold the U.S. Constitution, which his lawsuit argues requires a single election day, sits on the county canvassing board that reviews and counts ballots arriving after Election Day. Order says there is precedent here in favor of allowing counting of mail-ins past the date of the election. 13 days is a bit much, but it's what's known as postmarking. Any letter sent through the USPS will receive a postmark stating when it entered the mail system. This is very important in contract law. I understand that. We did look into that during the election. Unfortunately, that's nowhere near enough to ensure validity. And whilst I would not necessarily expect that ballots pushed into the election system would get a fake postmark, what I would expect is that ballots brought in later would be falsely postmarked. And that, I don't know how easy that would be, but I suspect not very difficult for someone organized and wealthy. So not disagreeing with you, Odar, but that, unfortunately, the postmark thing doesn't help very much. That probably is what they're referring to, though, Odar. And the point of the postmark there would be, well, we can be certain. Well, can you? You have as much trust in the validity of this as you do in the person that postmarked it. And you don't know who that is. And there are people in the world who want to elections. So yeah, I wouldn't do it if I were you. At least when it's 1 day. When it's 1 day, there's no massive guarantee that it can't be done, but it makes it much more difficult to rig the election when it's just 1 day of counting. Yeah. Well, Odar, I think some people do need mail-in voting, like those who are infirm, but they are the only ones who should be allowed to use it. Everyone else should have to go to the place. Yeah, it's a massive opening for fraud. And beyond that, I think the reason the Democrats are pushing so hard for this is that Democrats have an issue with turnout, where even though they're I'm not sure if this is true anymore, but there's always claimed back in the day, I have heard this a lot, that there may be more people that would vote leftist than actually do, but they don't get up out of their seat and go and vote for it. Now, that sounds honestly to me like a culturally leftist regime, which people claim to believe but who actually don't really deeply believe it because they have too much cognitive dissonance about its contradictions. And that cognitive dissonance prevents them from getting up out of their seat and going to work for the leftist establishment by voting for them or by being activists for them. That might be the correct reason why that happens, but that's also why I suspect they're doing this. Because if it's easier, if all you have to do is write the thing on your mail-in ballot that was sent to you and then send it in a mailbox, that's easier than going to the place to vote and actually doing all the, writing the. It's not much work, but it's just enough that it'll put some people off who have cognitive dissonance about it. I suspect. Sorry, excuse me. But if you just have to write in a mail and then put that in a mailbox outside your house, then that's much easier for people to do. The cognitive dissonance is going to have less of an effect preventing it. Now, you can argue about honesty of elections. You can argue about, well, shouldn't we want to hear what they all really think? And I think in that case, the less arbitrary way is the better way, or the way that has been working the longest. And paper ballots in a specific location is the most reliable long-term option. If we're talking about potentially getting more opinions in, ultimately you do get the issue of it being just a popularity contest if there's too little barrier to entry. But that's one of those things in democracy which I'm open to discussing either way of, where if you think it's a flaw of democracy, then you can just go the other way in it. You can just vary that. I think it's a matter where there's flaws on both sides. You just got to pick a balance point. So I'm not sure about that. But either way, that is the reason, not to say whether it's good or bad, but that's the reason I think the Democrats are pursuing mail-in ballots so much, is not only does it make it easier to rig because there's less of a chain of custody, and they sort of get bundled in collectively, so it's easier to mix and match, and it's easier to, you don't have to have the person present, so it's easier to have something that has not been verified in that way get into the count, but also because it would make it more likely for their people to vote for them.